my daughter, who I haven't seen for a while, is coming today, and it caused me to think of an incident that happened to she and I years ago here at Esalen. And it's a story which makes no sense whatsoever, but it really, truly happened, as far as I can tell. But it has all the qualities that bedevil this kind of thing. And what it was I was, as I am now, scholar in residence. It must have been some 10 years or so, 8 years or so ago. So Clea would have been like 9, and I would have been 40. So we were both younger and more naive. And it was dinner time at the lodge, and it was this time of year and this time of weather. And the fog had been coming all day in and out in the garden. And it was, and we genuflect here, God love him, to Carlos Castaneda, it was that very strange time of day, which only lasts a few minutes, between daytime and nighttime, the crack between the world, I believe. It's interesting in South America and also in Hawaii, at precisely that moment, every day, there are certain species of Lepidoptera that rearrange themselves. In other words, that come out from wherever they've been hiding for 24 hours, fly around furiously for 5 minutes, and then disappear again for 24 hours. But anyway, it was precisely that time of day, and the fog was coming in and out of the garden, and we were not in a mood for anything peculiar. We were intent on dinner, and we were walking the path through the garden, and suddenly, as this fog moved and cleared, coming down one of the rows was a bunny, a small rabbit, except that it had very small, short horns. Now, some of you may know the creature called the jackalope. The jackalope is a large jackrabbit with a pair of antelope horns, and it is a creature known only to exist above certain low-class bars scattered across California and Oregon. It's up on the wall, the jackalope. It's something you kid tourists with. As far as I could see, this was a baby jackalope about this high, and it crossed the trail no more than 5 feet in front of us. We both saw it, and our attitude was not amazement or an awareness that we were entering into a paranormal dimension. Both of us, I think our reaction was, come on. And then immediately behind it was a man, a very thin, not particularly healthy-looking man with a shaved head, wearing something like a gray running suit. And he was running crouched. He was with his hands out like this. He was trying to catch the jackabunny. And when he saw us, he appeared very confused and stood up and turned and walked the other way. And I just took her by the elbow and I said, let's get out of here. And then we went to dinner, and we've talked about it immediately after and since. And as far as anybody can reasonably and decently tell, this is the straight story on what happened. Well, it doesn't make any sense. First of all, the earth doesn't move from its pinions. But what does it say? It says that attention falling into a certain place of non-attention is set up for something like this to happen. And I can't explain it. I don't think it's explainable. It's sort of like, when you study quantum physics and they tell you that a black hole mostly puts out electrons, but the theory allows that it could eject Miatas and grand pianos, except that it would be very rare for it to eject a grand piano. But the theory does not preclude the ejection of grand pianos. So it's something like that, or it's a group hallucination, or it's a bewitchment, or, and it begins to proliferate. I was thinking about it last night or this morning, because I was in that place where I saw it happen. I was thinking, maybe Esalen lasts a really long time. Like maybe it's sort of like the Piazza San Marco in Venice, or the Central Aryan Stonehenge. Maybe we're actually starting something here that will last so long that for the next 5,000 years, people will relate to the Esalen Garden, and that somehow it's a nexus for others on strange missions. Now, the other thing about that story that I like, or that relieved me, is I guess the way to put it, is notice that it's absurd. And by being absurd, it's self-canceling. Suppose instead of a jackalope, which is an absurd creature to begin with, suppose it had been a gray of the wraparound eye type that are apparently trading high technology to the government for human fetal tissue, those people, then you would have had a real dilemma on your hands, because grays are objects of cultural fascination. In other words, if you see a gray, you just become part of a statistical body of people who've seen one. And so it's like more problematic. It's not that it's a non-reality, it's that it's a sort of a non-reality. This is, I think, part of the clue to understanding alien abductions and the way we generate information. If I tell you that I was up late last night and couldn't sleep and walked along the cliffs over Esalen, and that I encountered a shining disk, and that I then had my navel lint was removed by a team of extraterrestrial cosmetologists. This is evidence for an already existing body of data. If you say, well, you should call MUFON, they'd be very interested in this, or you should call somebody else. If I tell you I was restless last night and walked the cliffs of Esalen, and that I encountered Bugs Bunny in the company of Patrick Swayze, people would just say, you're nuts. It's not sanctioned. It's not allowed. And nobody gives a hoot or takes it seriously for a moment, because it serves no one's agenda. It's just insane data and should be immediately tossed out. This shows us, that the objects in the unconscious are given different weights. And you can tell a crazy story and join a self-help group, but if your story is too crazy, they won't have a group for you. They'll have a cell for you. So it's worth bearing in mind. Let's be generous here. Someone had prepared a bunny with horns to surprise someone else with whom they'd had a lifelong running joke about jackalopes. And they had arrived at Esalen for the surprise birthday party of this person and realized that the bunny was frantic because it hadn't eaten on the long trip. So they took the Jackabunny in its cage down to the garden to steal some lettuce for it. And in the fog and in the effort not to be seen, the bunny escaped with its horns in place, and this person, who probably didn't have a gate pass anyway, could see the whole situation getting out of hand and was frantically trying to capture the horned bunny and get it back in its... See, people say, gee, what a party pooper this guy is. Well, yeah, but we're trying to save the laws of physics and reason here, for crying out loud. But I have to tell you, that doesn't feel right to what it is. It felt to me like, I don't know, we all live in private Idahos. And somehow I was in somebody else's private Idaho for a moment, against my will. But I think we should always prefer the simplest explanation. Sometimes the simple explanation, like in a case like that, is maddeningly complex in itself. But if you don't believe that's what's happened, well then what do you believe? Do you believe that mythological animals are a potential infestation problem in the Esalen Gardens? Or just where do you draw the line?